A number one source of leaks in the industry is improper use of fittings or incorrect installation of fittings. And what we're going to cover today will hopefully help avoid some of those leaks. One of the main tools to use is the fitting thread identification kit. We're going to take a look at 3 different ones. Each manufacturer has slightly different variations to a thread identification kit. The tools vary slightly, but it's the same overall concept and usage of the tools. Today we're going to take a look at 3 different thread identification kits from different manufacturers. One will be Parker, Gates, and Eaton. Each one has the same basic tools. You have a simplified caliper for measuring the diameter, thread gauges for measuring thread pitch, and seating angle tools to measure the angle of a flare. The tools vary slightly from each manufacturer, but overall it's the same concept. Again, a caliper, thread gauge, and a seating angle. Eaton has their seating angle integrated into the caliper. And a thread gauge. Some of the differences then you will see is that Parker has additional, what I would call a cheat sheet on the back of the book that allows you to size and identify BSPP, BSPT, and MPT threads. So these are all types of pipe threads. The Eaton thread gauge, the caliper, has longer bills, which allows us to measure the recessed counterbore of a metric 24-degree cone fitting. Both the Gates and the Parker kits split their thread gauges into a North American and an international thread gauge, which allows for slightly easier identification when you're not sure which fitting that you have that you're measuring. The first step in identifying a fitting is to measure the thread pitch. Procedure is to find the proper thread gauge that fits with each of the threads. The thread gauge will then give you the number for the threads per inch if it's an English size, or the pitch if it's a metric side. In each case, you want to measure as many threads as possible to get an accurate reading. Once the thread pitch is measured, the second step is to measure the diameter of the fitting. Either an outside diameter or an inside diameter. When identifying the threads per inch, if you identify it in that fashion, you want to use the English side of the scale. If you identify a thread pitch to be one of the metric versions of 1, 1.5, or 2, in that case you want to use the metric side of the scale on the caliper. This one here, as an example, measuring the outside diameter, we get 14 millimeters. The third step then is to measure the seating angle of a flare when applicable. You can measure in 2 ways, either on the outside of the flare, or if it's a through fitting, you can actually measure through the inside of the fitting to measure for a proper angle measurement. In this case, you can see that 37-degree fits flush on both sides, and that the tool itself is in line with the axis of the fitting. Whereas with a 45, there's a little bit of a gap between the measurement tool and the seating angle of the flare. When measuring on the outside, you want to look at the axis of the fitting and make sure that the tool sits parallel with that axis. In this case, it sits slightly off, whereas with a 37 degree, the tool lays in line with the axis of the fitting and is parallel. This one here is an example of a 45. Again, you can see that the tool sits parallel with the axis of the fitting, or if using the internal measurement, you can see that there is no gap between the flare and the measurement tool.